It won't be long before school starts again, and the Arizona kids need your help. It's the Desert Financial Credit Union Stuff the Bus Back to School Drive. Head over to cw7az.com/stuffthebus.
Hello and welcome to this primary election debate for Democratic candidates from Arizona's Congressional District 3. This debate is sponsored by Clean Elections, the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. My name is Steve Goldstein, and I'm joined by Mari Rabago. We'll be co-moderating today's debate.
The format for this debate will probably be familiar to you, but the way we're sharing the debate is part of a brand new effort to support democracy in Arizona. Thanks to a partnership with the Clean Elections Commission and the Arizona Media Association, we're working to make sure these 2020 debates are the most accessible in Arizona history. That means this debate and dozens more between now and November will air on a long list of local TV stations, radio stations, and digital platforms, including support from local newspapers. It's a shared effort among hundreds of local media brands across Arizona.
Transparency is critical here. That's why these debates have been designed with input from a broad group of journalists in Arizona representing urban and rural communities. And we tried to keep the rules simple. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement and 1 minute for a closing statement. Candidates have drawn straws to determine the order. Throughout the debate, Mari and I will pose questions to each candidate, allow them to answer, and then make sure other candidates have a chance to respond. Whenever a question is directed to a specific candidate, only that candidate's microphone will be open. At all other times, every microphone will be open. Thank you to voters across Arizona who've submitted questions for this debate. We've reviewed all of them to make sure every voice is heard. However, no candidates have been given advanced access to any of the questions.
And Steve, with that said, let's introduce our candidates for the debate. We'll start with Ms. Raquel Teran, followed by Dr. Dwayne Wooten and Ms. Jasmine Ansari.
Dr. Wooten, you have the first opening statement, sir. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Dwayne Wooten. I'm a pediatrician, born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a true native, and I've only been out of the state when I was in college at Northwestern University in Chicago. My background is this. I have been my entire life dedicated to taking care of people. I started at age 7 saying that I was going to be a pediatrician. By age 8, I knew I wanted to come back and work in my hometown, and I worked toward that my entire life. I was blessed enough to go to Northwestern at 16 years of age, finished there at 19 years of age, started medical school at the University of Arizona. I think I have the record for being the youngest graduate in the history of the state of Arizona, the University of Arizona College of Medicine. I was 23 when I was done. So I've been taking care of children and adolescents since then, but I've also been very active in all kinds of issues in this country, let alone this state. Being an active person politically, my grandfather was a minister in this town for almost 50 years. He taught me what's important in life, and that's to take care of people. So I've been doing that for a very long time. I've also been very involved community-wise, developing some of the biggest entities that take care of people, Phoenix Children's Hospital being one. So I'm here for you to get to know me, and since I'm the newest kid on the block, if you will, in the political arena for CD3, I look forward to being just that person that you get to know.
Thank you, and Ms. Teran, you have 2 minutes.
Buenas tardes, Arizona. My name is Raquel Teran. I am running for Arizona's Congressional District 3. I've been a community organizer. I've been the state director for Planned Parenthood. I've been a legislator and chair of the Arizona Democratic Party, and I am a proud mother of an 8-year-old. And every single step of the way of my journey, I've been told that we cannot fight back the extremists. Yet, I led in efforts to recall Russell Pierce, the author of SB 1070. I led efforts to oust Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was terrorizing our communities. I led efforts to protect the Affordable Care Act. And under my leadership at the Arizona Democratic Party, we had historic victories that led to protect our democracy by re-electing Senator Mark Kelly and getting Governor Hobbs, Secretary Fontes, and Attorney General Chris Mays. I am incredibly proud of the work that we have done. I've knocked on thousands of doors and talked to many people in our communities who have felt left behind, who are upset because their rights are being taken away. That is why I am taking our fight to the halls of Congress to ensure that we deliver for the people in our district. Our campaign is supported and endorsed by many in our community, including Senator Mark Kelly. Our campaign is the only one endorsed by Planned Parenthood Action Fund, Reproductive Freedom for All, the League of Conservation Voters. The biggest unions in our state are behind our campaign. I will be the first Latina to represent Arizona in Congress. Join us at raquelteran.com. And for the people that are watching in Spanish, mi nombre es Raquel Terán. Estoy postulándome para el Congreso para representar el Distrito número 3. Usted me conoce como una persona que ha luchado por nuestra comunidad. Seré la primer latina en representar Arizona en el Congreso. Acompáñanos en raquelteran.com.
Okay, Ms. Ansari, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Good evening. My name is Yasemin Ansari. I'm a former Phoenix City Councilwoman and Vice Mayor, and with your support, I'm running for Congress to take on MAGA extremism, protect our democracy, and to keep delivering progressive solutions as your next Congresswoman. I am the proud daughter of immigrants who fled persecution and a brutal regime, seeking opportunity and freedom right here in the United States. Growing up in Arizona, they instilled in me the values of hard work, education, and that we can never be complacent when it comes to our democracy. These lessons could not be more important today as extremist Republicans ruthlessly attack our freedoms and our bodily autonomy. I got my start in Democratic politics as a high school student, organizing for the first Barack Obama presidential campaign and the Arizona Democratic Party, and as an intern for Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi. I then have spent my entire career working on progressive causes and getting things done. As a senior climate advisor at the United Nations, I took on corporate polluters and helped to deliver the historic Paris Climate Agreement. When Donald Trump was elected, I decided to run for city council to bring fresh, progressive ideas to City Hall, and that's exactly what we did. I became the youngest woman ever elected to the Phoenix City Council after knocking on 100,000 doors in the district. And as the vice mayor of our city, I protected abortion access, raised wages for thousands of workers, and passed legislation to address our climate, heat, and housing crises. That's why I'm proud to be endorsed by abortion advocates and the vast majority of labor unions in this race, from the firefighters to the carpenters, the laborers, flight attendants, and so much more. It has been the honor of my life to serve Phoenix, and with your support, I cannot wait to keep delivering as your next Congresswoman. Please join us at yaseminforcongress.com.
Well, it is time now to start with the real questions at this moment. And today here in Arizona, the Senate passed an act, a very controversial act, that would allow law enforcement, local law enforcement, to question the status of any people that is suspected to be an immigrant. A lot of people think we'll be going back to the days of SB 1070. If you win this election, once you get to Congress, what are some of the actions you will take to prevent this situation here in our state that would affect the economy, history tells us, and divide our state in many ways? We'll start with the answer of Ms. Terán.
Thank you, Mandy, for that question. I am a proponent of comprehensive immigration reform. We wouldn't have these type of legislation if we have comprehensive immigration reform. I got started in Arizona politics because there was a rise of the anti-immigrant sentiment after 9/11. And I am proud to be part of the movement that has fought back against laws like SB 1070. And we've been winning. In 2010, we recalled Russell Pierce, the author of SB 1070. We ousted Sheriff Arpaio. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we have comprehensive immigration reform. And this comprehensive immigration reform includes a pathway for citizenship for 11 million people. It includes a solution for the dreamers who have been ousted from the DACA program. It includes resources for the border. It includes modernizing our asylum seekers program. And of course, resources for the border. And I'm going to say that we need to make sure that we end for-profit detention centers, immigration detention centers. And I am committed to make sure that we get that done. I know that we've had a majority, both with Democrats and Republicans, and the issue has been politicized. It has been, it's been taken on by the most extremists, and we need to make sure that we return the humanity to this issue.
Thank you, Ms. Teran. And now, please, if you may answer this question, Dr. Wooten.
Well, I just want to make it clear, this problem has been in existence way before 9/11. This problem has been in existence for my entire life. People, a certain group of people, and I don't like to use names, but I'll just say a certain group of people on the right, they're the ones that have weaponized the immigration issue. They have systematically spoken about those immigrants who want to come to this country for a better way of life, who have real reasons to seek asylum, as being convicts, criminals, murderers, drug pushers, etc. And what I mean by that, weaponizing the situation, it makes people think, generally speaking, whenever the issue of immigration comes up, well, the borders are just open for all these terrible people to come across. We don't discuss the terrible people that come to this country from the East Coast. We don't discuss the terrible people that come to this country from Europe. We don't discuss those people that come to this country from Canada. But we talk about those terrible such people who come from the southern border. And so my goal, and my goal is real simple, is to make sure I bring some common sense back to Congress.
Thank you, Dr. Wooten.
There's no more common sense anymore.
Thank you for your response. And Ms. Ansari?
I am the daughter of a very brave, resilient woman who fled the Islamic Republic of Iran during the revolution in 1979. When my grandfather was in prison, she came to this country seeking refuge and opportunity. Throughout my life, I've worked with refugee communities, and as a councilwoman, helped direct $8.3 million to the International Rescue Committee that does work both at the border and also with newly arrived refugees from around the world. Immigration challenges will be one of my top priorities in Congress because it's an issue that has been stagnated for far too long, and in more recent years, we've allowed extremist MAGA Republicans to completely drive the narrative on this issue. There was a bipartisan border security bill that Donald Trump exclusively is responsible for messing up and ensuring that it doesn't get done. We need to make sure that at the border we have enough staff, enough asylum officers, border patrol agents, and better technology. And we also need comprehensive immigration reform, and we need to ensure that the millions of dreamers and temporary farm workers in this country have a status have a pathway to legal status and representation in the United States of America.
Thank you, Ms. Ansari. And just before we go to the next question, we are a little bit loose to some extent, but also we're going to try to start with a new question. Is 2 minutes, 1 minute for a reply from each of you. We will give you a chance to follow up if you'd like in the future. Dr. Wooten, let's start with what you mentioned about this problem with rhetoric, in particular, maybe how immigrants are being treated, or undocumented immigrants have been treated in this country for a number of decades. If you were in Washington, what steps could you actually take, not to improve the situation among immigrants, but actually this anti-immigrant rhetoric we keep hearing, which might get people really revved up? Do you have 2 minutes?
Yeah, we just need to identify it and discuss it. You know, people don't discuss it enough. It's very, very important to discuss the topic. The topic is that people are using the immigration issue as a weapon to breed hate, violence, etc., to a certain group of people. And we just have to take a step back and understand we have all the technology in the world right now to shore up our border. We had a very comprehensive package delivered to Congress just a few months ago that, as one of my colleagues just said, was nixed by a certain individual. I don't use his name ever. And so we just need to get a little more intelligent in Congress and use the common sense that God gave us and put the package together and enforce it, and not make it into a situation of those people, these convicts, these no good people. You know, most of the drugs that come across our southern border are brought by U.S. citizens, not people who are seeking asylum and trying to have a better way of life.
Ms. Ansari, I'd love to have you address the question, though, in terms of the rhetoric we're hearing, because the rhetoric may be perception or not, but it is that sort of rhetoric that tends to get people extra angry, extra pumped up, shall we say. Is there something you could do in Congress to calm the rhetoric?
I believe there is. You know, I love this district because we are a community of immigrants and self-starters, and I think doing the work to uplift our immigrant and refugee communities and give them pathways to find affordable housing, to get good jobs, and be positive contributing members of society is a very, very critical step, and that's why comprehensive immigration reform is so important. I also think representation plays a big role. Islamophobia was mentioned, and post 9/11 world, I can tell you that as the daughter of Iranian immigrants, not only my parents but myself have faced significant amounts of racism throughout our entire lives. If elected, I would be the first Iranian American Democrat ever elected in the United States. And representation of that magnitude does help change a narrative of people from a certain country or from a certain region of the world being scary or being terrorists or being, you know, those horrible things that unfortunately extremist Republicans often point to. And that is why having that kind of representation is important, and me going to Congress and articulating these issues and working with all sides of the aisle to compromise and find solutions is an important step.
Okay, and Ms. Teran.
Thank you. You know, I was born on the border. I was born in Douglas, raised on the Mexican side, crossed back and forth all my life. I think the perspective of bringing somebody to Congress from the border is incredibly important. This state is a border state. We need to make sure that us as Arizonans, we are indeed moving this conversation forward in Congress. And I think it's important to note that the Republicans have moved so far to the right. They have politicized with this issue. It's become such a MAGA issue. And unfortunately, Democrats have also moved more to the center. So I believe that somebody like me, who is a strong Democrat, pragmatic, progressive, can work with our caucus to make sure that we retake this issue and ensure that we work on it once and for all.
Thank you so much, and continue with more questions. And in this regards, also the topic of immigration. Dr. Wooten, I will start with you and the answer of this question. So Arizona has a history in representation in the Congress where they cross the aisle to look for bipartisan efforts. A comprehensive immigration reform should be what a lot of people want, but also the fear of going back to SB 1070 here in Arizona. If you would get elected and be in Congress, do you think there's a way to make things work for the border, make it secure, but also give a path for citizenship for those undocumented immigrants?
Absolutely. You know, one thing that I take a lot of pride in, I've always been able to bring people together and work together to find a solution to common problems. There was a simple solution that was put forth already, as we mentioned, and it was bipartisan. It was a good plan, and it was nixed by one individual. I have, for 40 years, been able to bring people together to come across and with solutions that people didn't think would ever come across their table. So I know I have the ability to bring people together, to work together for a common solution, and that's all that's necessary in Washington. We have too many people who are just not facing the facts. This country was built on immigrants. We're going to always have immigrants, and we should do immigrants the courtesy of respecting them as they go through the process. By no means do we accept criminals who are doing it the wrong way, and we have a system for that. But the backlog is terrible, and we need to address it. And we need to address it fast, because this is going to be a country of immigrants, and it's going to remain a country of immigrants for a long time. And I'm happy that it is. Most people in this room would not be here if it wasn't for immigration and migration. But one thing I will say is that we have to have a sense of compassion. So what has been lost in the last 40, 50 years is the word compassion. No one has compassion for human beings anymore. You know, to sit there and vilify a young mother who's trying to bring her child across the border for a better life and vilify them is unacceptable to me. It's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing in my life, being a pediatrician. So the bottom line is respect, compassion. Those are the ideologies that this country needs to go back to. And I think somebody like me, with the experience that I've had over the years doing multiple things, that capacity can bring to the table.
Thank you, Ms. Teran. Your response?
Look, once I'm elected to Congress, I'll make sure that we are bringing on the coalition that is supporting our campaign. I, for the last 20 years, have been working in Arizona politics and organizing, and it has always been through coalition building. And in order for comprehensive immigration reform to get done, it doesn't only mean that we work with the people who are elected to Congress, but we need to also work with the people who are most impacted, the people who have been affected by the broken immigration system. So we need to make sure that we're bringing the stories and the heart so that we can win hearts and minds in Congress. We need to make sure that we have the representation of stakeholders such as labor unions, business leaders, agriculture community, that we have faith leaders at the table to really move in a piece of legislation that brings everybody together. And that's what makes a difference. We've had opportunities. We've had this coalition in the past, and it has been politicized. But I am not going to lower my standards. I know that we can get it done. Our communities deserve it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Teran. And Ms. Ansari, your response?
I'm a lifelong proud progressive Democrat, but I'm actually the only one on this debate stage tonight who has ever been able to work in a bipartisan manner and pass policy that has benefited the lives of everyday Arizonans. When I served on the Phoenix City Council as a councilwoman and vice mayor, we worked often with our Republican colleagues. These might be colleagues that I disagree with 99% of the time, but when it comes to issues like raising wages for our firefighters and police officers and making sure we're dealing with our hiring challenges, we work together. When it comes to clean energy and ordering our first electric buses, I was able to build a Democratic and Republican coalition to pass a plan with a 9-0 vote. When it comes to homelessness, I worked with Republicans on a community court program to address those issues. So I have a track record of being able to have successful conversations with independents and with Republicans, and it's going to be no different for me when it comes to the issue of immigration in Congress.
Okay, thank you.
Can I respond to that? Because
You have 30 seconds.
because the councilwoman has said that she's the only one who has worked in a bipartisan matter. I was the majority leader in the Senate. I'm proud that my colleagues had elected me to be the majority leader. I have been working in the state legislature for 4.5 years. I had to work with both Republicans and Democrats to get things done, with people from the outside. I was a leader of ousting and recalling Russell Pierce,
Quickly,
and we
please.
ended up electing a Republican. So I know how to work in a bipartisan matter and
Dr.
get
Wooden,
things
before I
done.
move to another question, 30 seconds for you.
Yes,
on that.
I have to add to that. You know, this phenomenon of thinking that the only way that you have worked in a bipartisan fashion is to be in city council or the state legislature. I smile at that because I've been in entities where I brought together warring factions to create one of the most impactful institutions the state has ever seen, and that's Phoenix Children's Hospital. I pulled two groups together. And so, you know, you can pull people together and not be necessarily sitting in a house.
Okay, Ms. Ansari, we're going to change topics now. We know what happened when Roe v. Wade was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. If you were to be in Congress, would you vote to codify the right to an abortion? And if so, what action would you take? Because it may be different whether you're in the majority or the minority.
First of all, absolutely. If elected, I would be the youngest woman in Congress. And so this is an issue that's personal to me. It's personal for the young women on my campaign team, who all of us have less rights than our mothers and our grandmothers growing up in the year 2024 in Arizona. So I have taken action on abortion at the Phoenix City Council. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, I immediately reached out to abortion providers, especially those that were working in areas like South Phoenix and Levine in Congressional District 3, who expressed to me how terrified they were that they were unable, they didn't know what the legal landscape was. They didn't know if they could practice. They warned me that women would die. And so we immediately took action. I drafted and enacted an ordinance at the city of Phoenix that would protect doctors and patients in our city from being criminalized by our police department. So essentially it was a directive to our police department to make any calls related to abortion the lowest level of priority. Other cities in Arizona later followed suit on this. I take this issue extremely seriously. Being part of the protests where Brett Kavanaugh was first appointed to the Supreme Court back in 2018 is part of the reason I first ever decided to run for public office in the first place. And so I am a proud reproductive rights champion, proud to be supported by abortion advocates across the board in this race. And I also have released a plan on our website, YasminForCongress.com. I encourage you to check it out. It's 8 pages long, talking about all of the steps I will take in Congress beyond codifying Roe to protect reproductive rights, to enhance healthcare access, and make sure that moving forward, we are a country that is saying we are pro-choice and we will protect women.
Ms. Teran, you have 1 minute for a formal reply.
Thank you. 100%. I will work to make sure that we codify a role. And I am the only candidate on this stage that is endorsed by Planned Parenthood Action Fund and Reproductive Freedom for All. And that is because they trust me that I can take on this fight in Congress just like I did at the state legislature. What we can't trust is that Councilwoman Ansari has taken hundreds of thousands of dollars from MAGA donors who have bankrolled Donald Trump, an anti-abortion extremist. And unfortunately, we have gone through this process before where we had Kirsten Sinema, who went on to the Senate and ended up caving to the GOP donors. You can trust me to make sure that we protect our abortion access and reproductive freedoms.
We will have Dr. Wooten have a response, and then you can go ahead, Dr. Wooten.
I have a big response. Being a physician dealing with this day in and day out for the last 40 years, I've heard one of my colleagues say that she's done much work to make sure that physicians in South Phoenix, et cetera, feel comfortable about being able to give reproductive care to women, but I live it every day, and that's just not true. Physicians are leaving the entity of practicing medicine daily because they feel threatened. And so that is one of the reasons that somebody like me, who's lived it and lives it every day and understands the issues that go along with reproductive health in women, in particular in this city and our district, can be there as a super advocate. I will never, never, never get in the way of a woman making a decision with her physician of what she should do with her body, and I will work so hard to make sure that the rest of the country adheres to that.
Ms. Ansari, did you want to respond to Mr. Ron?
Absolutely. You can look at my progressive record, and I encourage voters to do so. I'm pro-choice, pro-union, pro-climate, pro-labor. And when I was on the city council, the Arizona Republic usually referred to me as part of the progressive minority because I was always on the side of passing the most progressive policies. The donors that my opponent is referring to have largely given to people like Mark Kelly, to people like Joe Biden, even AOC and Elizabeth Warren. And any others that she's referring to are largely Iranian Americans in this country who are excited to see the first Iranian American Democrat elected to the U.S. Congress, and saying and trying to mislead voters to say it's anything else is frankly xenophobic, offensive, and incredibly off base.
Let me respond to that. Look,
30 seconds.
Thank you so much. Voters and the people who are watching can go to the FEC website and do their own research on who has given money to Councilwoman Ansari and who has given money to Donald Trump. MAGA donors, not John McCain donors, MAGA donors. Please, I encourage you to visit that website.
We'll continue with more questions on this topic. I would like to ask Dr. Wooten, have you had any personal experience with the freedom of anyone within your family or close vicinity, the reproductive freedom that you would like to share with the voters listening and watching today?
We don't have enough time for me to share all the vignettes I could give you. I have a situation come up in my office almost daily. It's been worse recently. But I've had situations where I've had a child in one of my mom's pelvises, not viable, but was told that she had to carry this child, a child what we call anencephalic, it had no brain. But she had to carry the child to term because the doctors were worried and convinced that they may get filed upon if they were to do a DNC or abortion on this child. And so what happens? The mother is put at significant health risk. The mother can get septic. The mother could die. And I do know 2 cases of friends of mine who lost patients because they were worried about doing abortions, spontaneous abortions or abortions on a mother, and she ended up getting septic and dying. And we see it all the time. That's why one of the reasons I'm in this race, because I have to believe that I can bring some common sense to Congress. I think I should make a T-shirt that says "Common Sense for Congress," because it's unacceptable to me what we allow in this country to be persistently spoken about without the data to support it. And I have the data to support it. Like I said, I've been living it for 40 years. I've seen parents daily in tears. It is a catastrophe. And the fact that we even have to discuss this in 2024 tells you where we're at and where we need to go.
Thank you, Dr. Wooten. Ms. Teran, would you care to share if you had any personal experience in this regard?
Well, look, I sounded the alarm that Arizona could have a full abortion ban after my trip to El Salvador, where I got to visit women who had been incarcerated because of miscarriages. And we always knew that the 1864 total abortion ban was still in the books. So that's why I, along with my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, we introduced legislation to repeal the 1864 total abortion ban, because that is the reality that could be the reality of Arizona. So right now, the people most affected by any ban, if it's a 15-week abortion ban or if it's a total abortion ban, are the people that don't have access to health care, don't have the resources to go to California, to Nevada, to Mexico to get the basic health care that they need. We need to make sure that we codify Roe, and I am collecting signatures to make sure that our initiative gets on the ballot, because meanwhile we codify Roe, we will make sure that in Arizona we win the Abortion Access Initiative.
Thank you. Ms. Ansari, you would like to respond?
Absolutely. In my close family, we have had individuals who have needed to get life-saving abortion care, want to keep their privacy. But in my city council office, we very much prided ourselves on constituent services and making sure we're responding and being proactive in responding to calls. And when Roe v. Wade was overturned, we received several calls from women in the district who were highly, highly concerned about what access they had and what they could do. And we did, even though this issue was not usually under the purview of City Council, we did our best to connect them with abortion funds, with information about where they could go here in Arizona, clinics that they could go to, or even potentially providing funding to go out of state. So there's a lot of work that has to be done, and a lot of women in this community are deeply scared and deeply troubled, and rightfully so.
Ms. Ansari, thank you. Ms. Teran, let's move on to a different topic, the topic generally of the economy. Inflation has cooled from its highest levels, but this district has been affected starkly, as much of the state has been. What steps would or could you take as a member of Congress to make living more affordable for your constituents?
Yeah, that's an issue that is brought up at the doors all the time as I'm having conversation with voters. But you know what? It's not an issue just with this current inflation situation. This district has been left behind for many, many years. So when you have something like the pandemic or this inflation rate, our communities have a harder time moving forward. So I believe that we need to make sure that we're holding greedy corporations accountable, because right now the inflation is lower, but our communities are not feeling it. They're having to pay almost $4 for a dozen eggs. The rise of gas is sometimes it's $4, sometimes it's close to $5. So it's unpredictable, and not to mention the skyrocketing rent prices. It's basically unaffordable to rent right now. So we need to make sure that we're holding greedy corporations accountable, strengthen our antitrust laws so that we can also protect the consumers. And we need to make sure that big corporations are paying their fair share.
Okay. Ms. Ansari, your thoughts on inflation and how you'd help to either cool that or make the district and life more affordable for your constituents?
Absolutely. I think there's two main issues we need to be looking at here. One is that wages are simply not keeping up with the cost of living in Arizona or across the country. And second, we have a severe housing shortage in Arizona, nationwide, and we have to do something about it. When it comes to raising wages, I was proud as a councilwoman to vote to raise wages for thousands of working Arizonans, from firefighters to our bus drivers, our librarians. And that is what we need to continue to do. That is why I'm proud to have the support of the majority of labor unions who saw that work and want to keep fighting together to make sure we raise the minimum wage in Congress. Second of all, we need to look at our housing affordability, and that is because of a supply and demand issue that we have. On the council, I was a strong pro-housing champion. I spearheaded the effort to legalize accessory dwelling units to make housing more affordable. I worked to approve a record number of housing units in the district and have released a plan on our website specifically around addressing housing and homelessness at the federal level.
And Ms. Ansari, we're going to return to that topic a little bit later. Actually, Dr. Wooten, your answer on this particular question.
It's simple. We have a glutton of greed. We have people who are out there manipulating the situation with taxes and so forth that cause extreme hurt in the inner city communities of America, especially the inner city communities of Phoenix. We have over a $300,000 shortage, 300,000 unit shortage of affordable housing in Arizona. So we're not going to fix that problem overnight. But what we're going to do, what we need to do, is increase wages. And we also need to decrease prices. There is no reason, and my colleague just mentioned the cost of gas. There's no reason for gas to be as expensive as it is. We are producing plenty of gas in America. But why is it? It's greed. There's no reason for food to be so high. Yeah, wages are higher than they've been recently in the last decade, but food costs are 2.5 times what they were 10 years ago. And who does that affect
10
most?
seconds.
It affects the people in the inner cities and the communities that are deprived. So I'm going to work real closely to fix that.
Thank you, Dr. Wooten. And we're going to continue with another question on this topic. So we'll start with a response with Ms. Teran. And this is the question: do you believe that the action that led to the SHIP Act and the Inflation Reduction Act has led to increased prosperity here in Arizona and diversified a little bit that in the economy also here in our state?
Absolutely. I mean, these were incredible pieces of legislation that the Democrats delivered for our state. And they're bringing jobs, they're bringing green jobs, and we need to embrace this type of legislation. We need to work for more. But the problem is that people in our communities are not feeling it yet. And I agree, I'm going to agree with the fact that the wages have not kept up. And when you have these type of policies, sometimes it takes years for them to really go into effect and really be felt within the community. So we need to have these bold protections, these bold bills and these bold policies, but I hope that we can get to a place where we could actually raise wages so that people are enacting really quickly.
Thank you.
Quickly.
And Ms. Ansari, your response?
Absolutely. I think that both the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act were huge for Arizona. Now, we have to be very careful when it comes to implementation of those pieces of legislation. For example, TSMC building in North Phoenix, it's fantastic. However, we do have to make sure that the people who are getting those jobs are actually Arizonans, are part of our unions, and Arizonans are benefiting from those jobs. There was an issue early on, it was in the news, where there was concerns around people coming from out of the country to work in those jobs. I have worked hand in hand with many of our labor unions to make sure they're getting direct access to TSMC so that they can have access and benefit from those jobs. So that's really important. Ultimately, my policy priority in Congress when it comes to inflation is to make more in America. I think we know that supply chain issues are a huge cause of inflation, and we have to come back to investing more in our own country and bringing better jobs home.
I want to give each of you a minute on this one. Two of you mentioned the term greedy companies. Whether the viewers agree with you or not, listeners agree with you or not, Dr. Wooten, what actions would you take to regulate or to punish these so-called greedy companies?
Well, I don't like to use the term punish, but I would just use the term open their eyes and let them see the effect of some of their policies and what the effect is on the inner city community, in particular young families and the elderly. And again, I deal with it on the daily, and I see the stress that these young couples are under every day. I see them barely able to make ends meet. I see them losing their homes, losing their apartments, coming to me for help. And I've been very blessed over my career. I've been able to give a lot of help. But the bottom line is, I won't be around forever to keep giving the help. And we need to get it on a national level where we have a look and see of what is being done with regards to the people that are underserved and being neglected. You know, the top 1% in this country are doing extremely well. Unfortunately, the rest of them are not. And unfortunately for that, most of the stress, if you will, lies at the hands of the people who need the help the most. And so being a champion for those individuals, I'm going to be out there working diligently to make it happen.
Okay, but let's, Ms. Tron,
Yeah,
greedy companies.
Greedy companies. I mean, Walmart is a great example. Walmart just settled a lawsuit because they were inflating the meat prices and fish prices. And that is what many of these corporations are doing. It costs less to produce the good, but they have not lowered the cost. So price gouging, we saw it from the pandemic, and in the state legislature, we try to make sure that we pass legislation to impede price gouging. But we need to make sure that we have it in writing. We need to make sure that we strengthen our antitrust laws. You have Coca-Cola and Pepsi, and they're the ones who are setting the prices, and it's hard to bring down the prices then. So we need to make sure we have strong antitrust laws.
Ms. Ansari.
I'd look to the Trump tax cuts that are expiring next year. When you look at the individual portion of those tax cuts, there is a lot of room to completely revamp that and help working people and make sure that greedy corporations and the billionaires in this country are paying their fair share. It's in particular that individual portion where there is opportunity to give tax breaks to the middle class who desperately need it and go after and focus on the companies that are price gouging and that are making it so much more difficult for everyday Arizonans to survive in our state.
Well, thank you so much for the response. And something or an area that is very directly affected by the economy, the situation right now, is housing affordability. You go right or left in our state, everywhere, you see the construction of new homes, but yet the average family cannot afford those homes. What do you think are some of the actions that need to be taken in Congress so the housing industry is more affordable for the common or family here in our state? And we'll start with Ms. Teran.
Yeah, thank you. I have been a renter most of my adult life. My husband and I bought our home close to our 40s, so it was a challenge to get into a home. We are seeing people like Alondra, who was displaced from her mobile home park and didn't have anywhere else to go when the mobile home park was going to be demolished, or Mercy and Miguel, who are trying to grow their family but cannot afford houses right now. So number one, I think it's important that we are holding the corporate investors accountable. 1 in every 5 houses here in Maricopa County are owned by an investor. That makes it practically impossible for somebody to compete to buy a house, and then it makes it really expensive to rent that house. We need to make sure that we have the resources necessary to address the issue of the people who are unsheltered. Number 3, we need to make sure that we have consumer protection. So we need to make sure that when somebody has a voucher that they can use it without fear of discrimination. We need to make sure that we have rent control and that we get real affordable incentives for real affordable housing. And last but not least, that we have public housing, and in many cases there might be a need for wraparound services. What I know is that the Councilwoman Ansari has a plan that has failed to address these corporate investors. And she, frankly, is very disconnected from what's happening in our community, has no idea what it is like. And she is a millionaire landlord herself who has benefited from a loan from her father and has an investment property and is charging above the average Phoenix rent.
Thank you, Ms. Teran. And Dr. Wooden, this lack of affordability in housing also creates another issue in that aspect, which is homeless. What actions do you think it needs to be taken to prevent the situation?
Well, I've been waiting for this question. Over the last 8 months that I've been a candidate, I've toured about 7 countries, of course, on my own dime, because I jumped into this race late and didn't raise a lot of money yet. And I went looking at these other countries for one reason, to see how they dealt with the homeless problem. We in America, and I'm just going to say this blanketly, have no excuse to have so many people homeless. It's unacceptable to me. Why do I say that, and how can we fix it? Real simple. Show, first of all, that you have that C word that I mentioned earlier, compassion for your fellow man. I went to Singapore. I'm going to give you an example. I went to Singapore, quickly went around the city for maybe 5 days, looking for a homeless person, couldn't find one. Why? My driver said to Dr. Wooden, I will tell you why. Our country is about the people and the infrastructure. He said those high-rise condos over there, those are government-owned. And we rent them to low-income people based on what they can afford to pay. When they finish paying for their 30-year lease, usually they're 30 years, they own them. And what does that mean? They pass them down generation to generation and within their families. He said that's why you don't see hardly anybody homeless here. Now, that's a country that has about 1/200th of the GNP that the United States of America has, and they've solved the problem really easily. Our problem is we have too many corporate entities that want to make as much money on people as possible, and the stress and the inhumane situation of homelessness and living on the streets means absolutely nothing to them. Well, I tell you, it means something to me.
Thank you. Ms. Ansari, what are some of the actions that need to be taken to make housing more affordable here in Arizona?
Well, first of all, I'd like to start with addressing my opponent's attacks. It's very telling that she's focused on personal attacks against me because she knows she cannot attack my progressive record. She spent 5 years in the state legislature, only had one bill ever heard in committee, and actually voted against $50 million to address homelessness. So that is very concerning to me and something that I think voters should take a look at. When it comes to my record on housing, let me tell you what I've done. First, when it comes to homelessness, I led the effort to clean up the area formerly known as the zone near the Human Services campus. I took out excessive policing from that process, allocated more than $140 million from American Rescue Plan funds to go to emergency shelter beds, more affordable housing, behavioral health services, and we got more than 700 people off of the streets, which were incredibly dangerous, and into safe housing. That's number one. I have actually been one of the number one proponents of affordable housing in the city of Phoenix. I also legalized accessory dwelling units. I led zoning reform. And again, this has been a top issue for me that my opponent has done nothing on during her 5 years on the state legislature.
Dr. Wooten?
I'd
Ms.
love to
Tarrant,
respond.
about 30 seconds,
okay.
since you introduced the topic, about 30 seconds to you.
Thank you. First and foremost, the bill that the councilwoman is referring to is a bill that would criminalize people who are unsheltered. For me, that is a non-starter, and like it was for many Democrats. For us, we need to make sure that we are investing in real solutions in our communities that bring people to life, that gives people a roof over their head, and that affordable housing is accessible to everybody.
Thank you. Ms. Ansari, sorry, we're going to move on. Dr. Wooten, let's talk about law enforcement. Mm-hmm. How do you think law enforcement treats the average person in Congressional District 3?
Terribly.
You have 2 minutes to talk about it.
And I'll tell you why I say that. I'm married to a judge, criminal defense attorney, and a candidate for Maricopa County attorney, my wife, and we talk about it every day. The individuals in my district are treated sometimes terribly, and we've seen it, we witnessed it, and it's deplorable. But it has to do with the overall thought process. I love the Phoenix Police. My brother, 30-year veteran, my other brother, police officer also for a while. I'm not against the police, but I'm against bad policing. And we need to do something about that. The community at large does not still trust the police. The police are not trustworthy as far as they're concerned. I talk about it to them all the time. And we have to work strongly with increasing community policing, and we're going to do that. But I have to be honest with you. It's very scary for a lot of individuals that live in District 3, especially in the South Phoenix, Levine, West Phoenix, Maryville area.
Ms. Ansari, what would you like to say about law enforcement in the district?
There's lots to say. I served on the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee, where my top priority was making sure that we make law enforcement as fair and as transparent and as accessible as possible. First of all, when the DOJ decided to come to Phoenix, I welcomed it because we know that we have so much reform to do. I was proud to be the 5th vote to make the Office of Accountability and Transparency a success in the city of Phoenix. I also led the charge to civilianize our department. And what that means is that we have hired police assistants so that people with a lighter colored suit, no arms, can respond to calls that may not require an armed officer, so that our police officers can focus on the most violent crime. I also focused and voted for a $15 million community assistance program. So we have social workers and mental health professionals responding to 911 calls, again, when an armed officer doesn't need to be there.
You have about 10 seconds.
We need to reform the department, but we also need to make sure that if you're calling 911, whether you're in Maryville or Levine or South Phoenix, you are getting the same response as somebody in North Phoenix. And so that is why raising wages for officers and improving our hiring and retention has been so important to the city of Phoenix.
Ms. Tarrant, concerns about law enforcement in the district?
You know, I started organizing almost 2 decades ago, and that was because of the rise of the anti-immigrant sentiment in the state of Arizona. And there was one big law enforcement officer, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was abusing his power, targeting our community for the color of their skin. It was not only Latinos who were impacted, Indigenous, Black communities, all of us were impacted. And I worked to make sure that we held him accountable. We know that our communities want to have a safe space, safe neighborhoods. We need to make sure that we are investing in the ways that they can be live their best lives, in education, in healthcare, in safety nets, where they can indeed live their best life.
Well, moving on to another question, Dr. Wooten, do you believe that law enforcement officers are overly aggressive towards members of the community? And if so, what changes do you think they should be implemented at a federal level to prevent this here in our state?
Well, I don't think overall all law enforcement officers are overly aggressive towards certain members of the community. I think there's some. And the only way you're going to fix that is through community education, community policing education, have programs set up to maybe teach them how to interact with certain communities that they may not be used to and accustomed to. And the other thing is just to get more police officers from those inner city communities who are originally from those communities to go back to those communities and do community policing. And one of the reasons my office sits right across the street from what was then called the Matthew Henson Housing Projects. That's where I grew up initially. My medical office is 1 block away from where I initially grew up over more than 50 years ago. And why is that important? Because I wanted the people in the community to understand that I was with them and I was there for them. Well, the police officers need to have that same compassion, that same feeling for their community. So community policing, education is the thing that's most needed.
Thank you. And Ms. Ansari, what is your response into this question?
I believe by and large, our law enforcement does their very best to be there for our residents on their absolute worst days. Of course, there is always room for improvement. One of the most tragic cases was of Ali Osman, who was a refugee who came to this country who absolutely should not have been killed by our police department. That is why we are constantly, the city, not we anymore, we're constantly working on reform. There's a lot that can be done at the federal level. There's a lot of national best practices we can bring back here to Phoenix. We have, Phoenix has already implemented body-worn cameras, which has made a big difference. We enacted something called 30 by 30, an effort to make sure that 30% of the department will be women by the year 2030. You'd be surprised to hear we got a lot of pushback, or maybe not surprised, by MAGA extremists about this, but I think it's something important to be more reflective. And again, I think civilianizing the department as much as possible, and federally we can work to bring back investments to improve our technology within our department, improve training, and make sure that first responders have all the tools they need and they are equipped to do the best job possible.
Ms. Teran, what changes should be implemented?
Yeah, well, we have seen, I do believe that we have seen over-policing in our communities, and unfortunately, the people who pay the consequences many times are the Black and brown men in our community. I mean, I can say in one sentence that Senator Hernandez, her brother, was shot by the police. Denise Garcia, her son, was shot by the police, the Phoenix police, and that is that's atrocious. And I believe that at a federal level, we could start off with ending mandatory sentencing. We can legalize marijuana at a federal level and look into many options so that we can reform our criminal justice system.
Okay, thank all of you for an informative, spirited debate. It is time for closing statements. Each of you has 1 minute. To keep us on time, we'll politely cut you off if you run over. Dr. Wooten, you have 1 minute.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, and I hope that with this debate, you get to know me a little bit better. I am a true native, born and raised in this district, and have spent my entire life for the people. I'm not a politician. I never want to be a politician. I want to be an advocate, and that's what I've been, and that's what I want to continue to be. We have a lot of problems in this country. The reason why I decided to run was because I got tired of complaining. I got tired of seeing the pain and the hurt and the anger and the frustration. And so what did I do? I said, I'm going to lose my mind and run for Congress. While I'm still practicing medicine full-time, mind you, and I plan to still do that while I'm in Congress. Congress is a part-time job. Some people don't know that. But I can get a lot done because I have the history and the experience of pulling people together and coming up with solutions for common goals. And my two fellow candidates here just don't have that experience. So I welcome your vote, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Ms. Teran, you have 1 minute.
Thank you for this conversation. Truth be told, people like me have been told that we don't belong. You don't have millions of dollars to win a congressional race. You're an activist. And that you are not going to win. But that's what many people in our districts have heard many times. And like them, I've never let that stop me. In 2006, when I was handed a clipboard with voter registration forms as a way to bring comprehensive immigration reform, worker protections, an economy that moves everybody forward, I knew right then and there that by engaging our communities in the decision-making process, we could change the state of Arizona. These same communities are now turning Arizona blue. Our campaign has a strong and broad coalition supported by Senator Mark Haley, supported by the Pastor family, supported by Unite Here, and many, many others. Join us in making history by electing the first Latina to represent Arizona in Congress.
Okay, Ms. Ansari, you have the closing statement. 1 minute, please.
From the United Nations to the Phoenix City Council, I have taken on MAGA extremists and delivered progressive results at every juncture in my career. I came here tonight to talk about policies and plans, and I hope that's what you heard from me. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, I took action to protect doctors and patients in our city. I led the charge to pass some of the most progressive policies in Phoenix history on climate, on jobs, on housing, to make sure that we remain an equitable and sustainable city for generations to come. As I said before, I'm the daughter of 2 immigrants who fled a revolution to come to this country, and they found the American dream. I am their daughter, and that's something to be proud of. We need more and more people to fight for the next generation of Americans to find success and find their American dream. I hope you'll join the vast majority of labor unions in supporting our campaign. I look forward to earning your trust to be your next Congresswoman.
Well, thank you. And this wraps today's debate with the Democratic candidates for Arizona Congressional District number 3. As a reminder, the Arizona primary election is on July 30th, and early voting starts July 3rd. All registered voters can participate in the primary, including independents.
There are a lot of offices up for election this year, so we'll keep hosting debates through the summer and fall. Head to azmedia.org to see a list of every local media partner, plus upcoming debates and where you can find them on TV, radio, and digital platforms. You can also see the full debate schedule, learn more about clean elections, and submit questions for future debates by heading to azcleanelections.gov. And on behalf of our partners at Clean Elections, the Arizona Media Association, Reister, and Bitfire Studios, thanks for joining us.